When I lost my job, it felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. I still remember the exact moment the phone call ended. My boss's voice called, clipped, final. "We are letting you go, James. Effective immediately." I stared at the receiver, numb, as if the words weren't meant for me. But what stung most wasn't just the loss of my livelihood. It was the look on Ethan's face when I told him. Instead of concern, there was a smirk, a barely concealed laugh that cut deeper than any dismissal letter. "You? Unemployed? That's rich, Dad." Ethan's voice dripped with disbelief and mockery. "What are you going to do now? Sit around and mope? Maybe you should have thought about that sooner." His words felt like a slap to my pride, but I said nothing. I'd spent years building a career, sacrificing weekends and holidays, all to give my family a better life. And now, at 48, I was suddenly a man with no job, no plan, and a son who seemed to revel in my downfall. The tension between us had always been there, simmering under the surface, but this moment shattered the fragile peace we maintained. Ethan had never been the supportive son I'd hoped for. He had his own ambitions, his own life, and apparently, not much room for empathy. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay, that I'd figure something out, but the truth was, I had no idea how. Days passed in a blur of rejection letters and fruitless job applications. The house felt colder, emptier, as if my unemployment had sucked the warmth out of every room. Ethan's attitude didn't improve. Every dinner was a minefield of snide remarks and sarcastic jabs. His laughter when I mentioned looking for work was a constant reminder of how little faith he had in me. I began to wonder if my son had always seen me as a failure, waiting for the moment I'd fall apart. One evening, exhausted and defeated, I sat in the living room clutching an old family photo. It showed my father and me, standing proudly in front of the house he'd left to me, a modest but cherished inheritance that had been in our family for generations. The house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of legacy, sacrifice, and hope. As I traced the worn edges of the photo, an idea began to take shape, a desperate plan to keep my family afloat. When I shared the idea with Ethan, I watched his expression shift from disbelief to outright ridicule. "You want to sell the house? Dad, are you serious? That's our inheritance. It's worth a fortune. You can't just sell it off like some old car." His voice was incredulous, as if I'd proposed something insane. But I knew better. The house was valuable, far more than Ethan realized, and selling it might be the only way to buy us time. "I don't want to sell it," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we need the money. If I can't find work soon, it's the only option. This house has been in our family for decades. It's worth a lot, probably more than any job I'll get right now." I looked at him, hoping for a flicker of understanding, but all I saw was skepticism. Ethan laughed again, louder this time, shaking his head. "You're kidding, right? You think selling the house will fix everything? It's not that simple, Dad. You're out of touch." His words were like a slap in the face, but beneath his mockery, I sensed something else, a mix of disbelief and fear. Maybe he was scared of losing the one thing that connected him to our past. Despite his doubts, I started making calls to real estate agents, gathering appraisals, and weighing my options. The more I delved into the process, the more I realized how much the house was worth. The agents estimated its value at around $50 million. I could hardly believe it myself. $50 million. It felt surreal, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. When I told Ethan the price, his laughter abruptly stopped. His eyes widened, and for the first time in weeks, he looked at me without contempt. $50 million? He whispered, disbelief mixing with a flicker of greed. "That can't be right." But it was. The house, our family's legacy, was worth more than I'd ever imagined. The tension between us grew thicker with each passing day. Ethan's initial mockery gave way to anger, frustration boiling over in sharp words and bitter accusations. "You're selling our future, Dad. Do you even think about what this means?" he yelled one night, slamming his fist against the kitchen table. "We are not just selling a house, we are selling everything that made us who we are." I sat there, silent, feeling the weight of his anger and the truth beneath it. Maybe he was right. Maybe selling the house was more than a financial decision. It was a sacrifice that cut deep into the fabric of our family. But with no job, mounting bills, and a son who seemed to have lost all respect for me, I saw no other way. In the quiet moments after his outburst, I found myself questioning everything. Had I really failed as a father? Had I let my family down? The house was more than property. It was a symbol of stability, a connection to our roots. But sometimes, survival demanded hard choices. The next day, I sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table, the air heavy with unspoken words. "I know this is hard," I said quietly. "I'm not doing this lightly. But if I don't act soon, we could lose everything. Our home, our future. I'm trying to protect us, even if it doesn't seem like it." Ethan looked away, his jaw tight. "You're not the man I thought you were," he muttered. "I don't know if I can believe in you anymore." His words cut deeper than any financial crisis. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust, respect, and the bonds that were unraveling before my eyes. Yet, despite everything, a flicker of determination sparked within me. Losing my job had stripped away my sense of security, but it hadn't broken me. If selling the house was what it took to keep us afloat, then I would do it. I owed it to myself, to Ethan, and to the legacy my father had left behind. That night, as I sat alone in the darkened living room, I thought about the journey ahead. The battles to come, not just with the outside world, but with my own family. Ethan's laughter haunted me, a reminder of how far we'd fallen, but also a challenge to prove him wrong. I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. I reached for my phone and dialed the real estate agent again. "Let's start the paperwork," I said firmly. "It's time to sell." The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with conflict and sacrifice, but I was ready to face it head-on. Because sometimes, a man has to lose everything before he can find what truly matters. The days following the decision to sell the house felt like walking through a storm without an umbrella. Friends and family, who once offered sympathetic nods, now whispered behind closed doors. I could see the doubt in their eyes, hear it in their cautious words. "Are you sure this is the right move, James?" they'd ask, their concern tinged with disbelief. My son, Ethan, was no different. His resentment simmered, growing thicker with every conversation that touched on the sale. At first, I thought that once the sale was underway, things might settle, that the weight pressing down on our family would lift. But instead, the tension only intensified. Ethan's attitude shifted from mockery to cold distance. He stopped sharing his plans, stopped inviting me into his world. It was as if by agreeing to sell the house, I'd severed the last thread connecting us. Despite the backlash, I stayed resolute. I believed that this sacrifice, painful as it was necessary to secure our future. The house was more than a financial asset. It was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild from the ruins of unemployment. I poured every ounce of energy I had into managing the sale, negotiating terms, and planning what came next. If this was the price to pay for survival, so be it. Yet, watching Ethan from the sidelines, I couldn't help but notice a change in him. His usual bravado was replaced by something quieter, more contemplative. I caught him staring at the house during our rare moments together, his gaze heavy with unspoken thoughts. It was as though the reality of what we were losing was finally sinking in. One afternoon, as I sat reviewing documents in the kitchen, Ethan approached hesitantly. "Dad," he began, voice low and uncertain. "I've been thinking, maybe I was too hard on you." The surprise in his tone caught me off guard. For months, his attitude had been a wall between us, and now, behind it, I sensed a crack. He continued, "I didn't realize how much the house meant to you, or how serious things had gotten. I guess I was scared, about us, about what losing it all would really mean." His words hung in the air, fragile but sincere. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that had widened between us, but I wasn't sure how. That evening marked the beginning of a slow thaw in our relationship. We started talking more, cautiously at first, about memories tied to the house and the future we both feared. Ethan shared his own uncertainties about his path, his dreams clouded by the instability around us. For the first time in a long time, I saw my son, not as an adversary, but as a young man grappling with his own fears. As the sale progressed, the reality of the impending change settled in. The house, once a symbol of security, was becoming a chapter closing. I found myself torn between relief at the promise of financial stability and sorrow for the loss of the home that held so many memories. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I'd made the right choice, if the price of survival was too high. Then came the day the deal was finalized. The check was staggering, a sum beyond anything I'd imagined. $50 million. It was both a blessing and a burden. With that money in our hands, The future seemed simultaneously full of possibility and shadowed by the sacrifices we'd made. Ethan's demeanor softened, the anger replaced by a tentative hope. But even as the money promised a fresh start, the emotional cost weighed heavily. One evening, I found Ethan sitting alone in the living room, staring at the empty fireplace where our family gatherings once took place. His eyes were wet, and when he looked at me, the walls he'd built crumbled. "Dad," he said, voice cracking, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't understand how much you were doing for us. I was just scared of losing everything." I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry too," I admitted. "I should have talked to you more, let you in. We are in this together, Ethan." His tears were a release, not just of regret, but of a newfound understanding between us. The sacrifices we'd made were not just financial, they were deeply personal. In that moment, I realized the true value of what the sale had brought us. Beyond the money, it forced us to confront our fears, to rebuild trust, and to start healing. Ethan's remorse wasn't just about the house. It was about the fractured bond between father and son. And that bond, fragile as it was, held the key to the future. With the funds secured, we began discussing plans, not just for paying bills or investments, but for rebuilding our lives. Ethan expressed a desire to be part of the process, to contribute, to redeem himself in my eyes. I saw a spark in him that had been missing, a willingness to grow, to take responsibility. We met with financial advisors, mapped out budgets, and explored opportunities. The weight of the past lingered, but so did a cautious optimism. The house may have been sold, but the legacy it represented was far from gone. It was now up to us to transform this inheritance of memories into a foundation for new beginnings. Amid all this, I grappled with my own doubts and fears. The job market was unforgiving, and the shadow of unemployment still loomed. But the money gave me time, a precious commodity to regroup, rein, and find a new path. I reminded myself that resilience wasn't about never falling. It was about rising every time you did. Ethan's transformation was encouraging. He started taking steps toward his own goals, enrolling in courses, seeking internships. Our conversations grew more frequent and meaningful, filled with mutual respect instead of resentment. The house, once a battleground, had become a catalyst for change. Yet, the journey was far from over. The emotional scars ran deep, and the road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope, a belief that we could navigate this upheaval together. The sacrifices we'd made were painful, but they had awakened something vital within us, the willingness to fight for a better tomorrow. One night, as I sat alone in the quiet house that was no longer ours, I reflected on the transformation taking place. The sale had been more than a financial transaction. It had been a reckoning. It exposed our vulnerabilities, forced hard conversations, and ultimately, brought us closer. Ethan's tears that evening were a turning point, a confession of regret and a promise to change. I knew the road to healing would be long, filled with challenges and setbacks. But the foundation was laid, and with it, the possibility of reconciliation. The money was a tool, yes, but the true inheritance was the renewed bond between father and son. It was fragile, imperfect, but real. And as we moved forward, I held onto that fragile hope, ready to face whatever came next with strength and determination. After months of tension, mistrust, and painful conversations, Ethan and I finally began to rebuild what had been broken between us. The sale of the house had been more than a financial necessity. It had become a turning point, forcing us to confront our fears, regrets, and hopes for the future. Slowly, we started to find common ground, recognizing that despite our differences, we were still family. One of the first signs of our reconciliation came unexpectedly. Ethan approached me one afternoon, holding a folder filled with notes and ideas. "Dad," he said, his voice steady but hopeful, "I've been researching investment opportunities. I want to help manage the money from the sale. Maybe we can build something lasting together." His eyes held a mix of determination and vulnerability, a far cry from the sarcastic son who once mocked my unemployment. I looked at him, surprised but pleased. "I'd like that," I replied. "We need to be smart about this, secure our future without losing sight of what really matters." Together, we began meeting with financial advisors, carefully planning how to invest the $50 million. It was overwhelming at times, the responsibility and the stakes so high, but we faced it as partners. Our conversations changed, too. Gone were the days of bitter arguments and silent treatments. Instead, We talked openly about our fears, our dreams, and the lessons we'd learned. Ethan shared his aspirations with honesty, admitting the mistakes he'd made and expressing a desire to grow. I, in turn, opened up about the pressure I'd felt as a father, the weight of expectations, and the pain of feeling isolated. One evening, as we sat reviewing investment portfolios, Ethan paused and said, "Dad, I want to thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was harsh. I know I made things harder than they needed to be." His words were sincere, carrying the weight of genuine remorse. I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "We are both learning, Ethan. This is a new beginning." With the financial foundation set, we turned our attention to rebuilding our lives. Ethan enrolled in courses to sharpen his skills, determined to contribute meaningfully. I sought new job opportunities, drawing on the financial cushion to take calculated risks. The stress of unemployment lessened, replaced by cautious optimism. But beyond money and careers, the most profound change was in our relationship. We began to share moments of laughter and support, small but significant steps toward healing. Family dinners, once strained affairs, became opportunities to reconnect. We reminisced about better times and dreamed about what lay ahead. Inspired by our journey, I decided to channel our experience into something larger. I started working on plans for a foundation dedicated to supporting families facing financial hardships and the emotional toll of unexpected crises. It felt like a way to give back, to turn our pain into purpose. The media caught wind of our story, about a father and son overcoming adversity, rebuilding trust, and turning a financial windfall into a mission for good. Interviews followed, and I found myself speaking openly about the challenges of unemployment, family conflict, and the power of forgiveness. The response was overwhelming, with many reaching out to share their own stories. Through it all, Ethan remained by my side, his involvement a testament to how far we'd come. Yet, even as we embraced this new chapter, we were not blind to the past. The scars of our struggles lingered, reminders of the cost of division. But they also served as motivation to nurture the bond we'd fought so hard to restore. One afternoon, as I reviewed letters from people touched by our story, I noticed an envelope with a familiar handwriting, Ethan's. Inside was a heartfelt note, expressing gratitude and hope. "Dad, I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I'm proud of how far we've come. Let's keep building, together." Reading those words, I felt a swell of emotion, pride, forgiveness, and love. The journey from mockery and misunderstanding to partnership and purpose had been arduous, but it had transformed us both. The inheritance we'd sold was gone, but what remained was far more valuable, a renewed relationship and a shared vision. As I looked around my home, a place filled not with the echoes of conflict but with the promise of possibility, I knew that this was only the beginning. We had faced loss and sacrifice, but we had also discovered resilience and hope. The future was uncertain, but together, Ethan and I were ready to face it, stronger and wiser than before.